I want to introduce Bill Fogarty. Bill Fogarty is on our advisory board. He is also the our man in Arlington and writes for the Falls Church News Press. And he is really quite an addition to the advisory board, providing us with great history and advice and guidance. And I will let him tell you the rest because he's a great speaker. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. And it's always a matter of logistics to begin with. So we have the PowerPoint going. I think my microphone is working. Interior here. I'm assuming, unless I hear from Marty, the voice of Marty Sedan, that everything's good on Zoom also.
I think so. We don't have a picture of you, Bill, but there's no camera in the auditorium. Other than that, I think we're good to go.
Right. I tend to drift usually when I speak, and so, but I know that it's important to stay by the podium. Every a place has things a little bit different. There's not as much room up here as I usually am accustomed to. So you may see me, I make printed copies of my slides to make sure, double sure that everything's okay. So I may end up ripping them out one page at a time here, and I'll just be throwing them on the ground, but it's okay. All right, it's okay. So some housekeeping matters. I tend to use PowerPoint as an outline. Today is kind of history by the headlines. You're going to see a lot of newspaper headlines. Those of you who have taken any of my courses at Encore Learning know two things about me. One is I talk fast. I'm from New Jersey. And I move quickly through slides. So I will make my slides available to anyone who wants to view them. I'll have a little signed up sheet. Or take one of my cards. And you can also get on my email list for the Our Man in Arlington column. I send out a weekly email with a link for those who can't find it anywhere. I have some of this week's issues outside. There is something nice about the printed word, I will say. So I have 60 minutes to get through 74 slides. Is that humanly possible? I think so. We'll see. I will ask my timer to set the clock, so to speak, and let me know when 30 minutes are up, when there are 5 minutes to go. Hopefully, we'll learn something new today about the past and make a connection with today. It's about civic duties. It's hard to believe that 1946 was 80 years ago. And actually, 1946 was a big year for the county because the county was celebrating its centennial. 1846 was considered the beginning of our county through the retrocession. And so thinking we're at 180 years now. So 20 years from now, let's see how we do with our bicentennial. So 1946 county board election. I'm calling it the biggest upset in county board history. I don't know all the county board elections, but I think I'm in pretty good ground there. I call it the first crack in the Byrd Machine, and it involves two Virginians, Edmund Campbell and Daniel Dugan. Now, Edmund Campbell is pretty well known around here, Campbell Elementary School, Campbell Street. He was 50 years old at this point in time. He was born in Lexington, Virginia in 1896. His father was a dean at Washington Lee University. His grandfather also taught at Washington Lee University, whose neighbor was Thomas Jackson, who also became known as Stonewall Jackson. They knew the Lee family very well, and that was his upbringing. And he talks in one of his interviews, Campbell, about growing up in Lexington, walking down the sidewalk as a kid and pushing the black kids off the sidewalk. And he mentions this in one of his interviews with great regret and great reflection. Meanwhile, Daniel Dugan is also Virginian, born in 1916. He's 30 years old in 1946. And he was living in the Boston area, went to Boston Elementary School. He makes mention of that in his campaign literature. A lot of very interesting things about him. He had forebears who were at Valley Forge with General Washington. Their names are on a monument there in Valley Forge. His great-grandfather was a Confederate in the Civil War, was imprisoned, lost about 100 pounds in prison. And Dugan talks in his interview about growing up in Arlington and his grandfather living with them. And his grandfather would not cross the Potomac River to go into Northern Territory. So that was his upbringing there. So here we are in 1946. And I just want to go through some of the research sources that I go through. The Charlie Clark Center for Local History is tremendous. There are a lot of great interviews there, some old interviews, the Arlington Historical Society magazines, collections, dissertations. There's so much there to find. The interviews I find are especially good. And I would just kind of, as a PSA, is I think we need to do more interviews now here in the 21st century of people from late 20th century, early 20th century. So what else are my sources? Books. So these are 3 books here. One is on the left-hand side, Martha Ann Miller, The First Century, Not Ready for the Rocking Chair. She was a teacher at Stratford in 1959 when Stratford was desegregated. She and her husband Malcolm were big members of the Citizens Committee for School Improvements in 1946. And I can get a lot of good information from this book. One of the other books is Arlington County, A Modern History by Sherman Pratt. You see, I have an autographed copy of Sherman Pratt. I got that online, but and then Arlington County, A History by C.B. Rose Jr. So there's a lot of resources, but my main resource in trying to go back 80 years is newspapers, newspaper archives. Virginia Chronicle is part of the Library of Virginia. You can get so many Virginia newspapers online. At this time, there was an Arlington Daily, there was the Sun, which later became the Northern Virginia Sun, the Daily Sun, the Arlington Chronicle. There were Richmond papers you can get. You can get Washington Post, Washington Evening Star was very big in the 40s. The Civic Federation always gave an Evening Star a trophy every year to one of their members. And the Washington Afro-American to get some news about the Black community. So these were some of the archives that I was able to go into. I always preface my history talks with a quote from Barbara Tuckman. She was a historian, wrote Guns of August and other books. And she says, she took all her notes on index cards. And when the history class came in, she says, history depends on which index cards I pick and what order. Yeah. So the same way here is I'm searching through the archives, I'm searching through things. Here's what I'm finding. So there was emphatic opposition to the Byrd Machine. So this is, again, one of the rabbit holes of history, right? I go through these headlines. There's a political ad in July of 1946 from J. Elwood Clements. And he answers the smear of Arlington citizens. He's a native Arlingtonian. His dad had been sheriff in 1920. And he's responding to Tommy Lummox Hunter, a writer for the Richmond Times-Dispatch, called the editorial mouthpiece of the Byrd Machine, and saying that Hunter has revealed his contempt for Arlington County, which really gets Elwood Clements incensed. And here in yellow is part of his letter. Your recent reference to Arlington County, quote, now filled with a slop over of Washington City, is indicative, I think, of the real feeling of the organization which you represent and to which you long ago sold your soul and heritage. So he is really pushing back against the Byrd Machine's mouthpiece. He goes on, it's a half-page newspaper ad. The primary for Senate, Harry Byrd's running for Senate again, and Clements is representing Martin Hutchinson, who's taking on Byrd in the primary. Here he says, to you, the desirability of an abundant supply of whiskey is and has been more important than the desirability of a decent education for boys and girls of Virginia. And then he goes on to say, it's amazing your own son could stand the stench of a slop-ridden community where he seems to have found satisfactory employment with a successful Arlington County law firm. So he's done his homework and he knows that Hunter's son is working for, I believe it's Adams and Porter. And then he ends in this, and again, he's a native Arlingtonian. If no new people had come into Arlington County in the past 25 years, we would still have the old germ-filled well, the old fly-infested outhouse, and the old mud-holed roads. Because of our growth, we have a county-wide water system, a county-wide sewer system, a modern hospital, and decent streets and stores. The tax dollars of all the people of Arlington have brought about these improvements, not enjoyed by any other county in the state. Would you trade the Arlington of today for the Arlington of 1921? Harry Byrd would. So that is kind of the animus against some of the Byrd Machine. So what is the Byrd Machine? Okay, so in the 1940s, here's a general picture. It's an organization. It was actually the Martin Machine at the turn of the century in 1900. The General Assembly appoints a circuit court judge. In Arlington, Judge Walter McCarthy was appointed in 1930. He was a young lawyer. He was the youngest judge appointed in Virginia at that time. His senior law partner was Charles Jesse. Charles Jesse was a delegate of the General Assembly. Things are happening from Richmond to Arlington. So McCarthy appoints school trustees, who then appoint school board members who hire the school superintendent. Not much of a voice for the citizen in Arlington. In May of 1946, those trustees are about to appoint a new school board member, but they run into trouble. The machine takes a hit. May 27th, 1946. I call it the sit-in of May 27th. They're trying to appoint a new school board member. Upset citizens fill the courthouse room. There's an announcement of who the machine has picked, and the people are very angry, and they won't leave the courthouse. They just stay in their seats. So I call that the sit-in of 1946, and we'll get to the specifics, but we'll first do a little context. When you say the Byrd Machine, this is like 1927 to 1965. Harry Flood Byrd, senator, state senator, 16 to 26, governor for just the one term, 27 to 30, and then U.S. senator for 32 years. So it's an organization based on one-term governors, right? So the governors don't have much power because they're one term and they're out. The Dillon rule, which I know a lot of you know about, but not everybody. So to explain, the Dillon rule says the state is king, has all the power except what we give to you in the jurisdictions. So it creates power in the Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House is not term limited. The General Assembly only meets on even years. They're only meeting in 1942, 1944, 1946. Not much can happen when you meet only every 2 years. The General Assembly appoints judges to 8-year terms, and those judges appoint numerous boards and trustees. So everything is controlled out of Richmond. So let's take a look at the local machine. I kind of call this the pyramid of power. It's all made up, but let's analyze it. Who's at the top? The circuit court judge. And you think about that judge has the patronage system of so many appointments. You have your state senator and House delegates. Then you have your constitutional officers. And think about it. These are full-time jobs with lots of staff. Again, patronage comes into effect. So we have the sheriff, clerk of the court, commissioner of revenue, treasurer, commonwealth attorney. Those are the 5 constitutional officers. Then you have, in 46, 5 county board members. They're part-time, no staff. They hire a county manager. And then you have a county manager who hires lots of staff. Not so much in 46, but more and more over the years. And so I put a little parenthetical question to myself there. Should the county manager be above the county board because they have so much patronage ability in who they hire? I have a lot of rhetorical questions for you today. So now let's go with some quick governance history. And I will start to tear out my sheets here very easily. 1870 and 1942, jurisdictions in Virginia administered by specific laws passed by the General Assembly. You have either a county or a city, and a city has more detailed laws, right? Now, a county, within a county, you could have a town. That's why I put town under the county there, like the town of Vienna within the county of Fairfax, right? But you have either a county or a city. Those are the jurisdictions. And cities have power of annexation. I just want to show you this map. I'm not sure how well you can see it. Alexandria took 8 acres of our property in 1915, 1929. Basically, the city of Alexandria started as Old Town, and they grew by taking property from Fairfax and from Arlington, all the way up to, you can see in the red, in December 1929, how much property they took up the 4 Mile Run. They took the Potomac Yards, the great tax base for the property. So maybe you can see why some people wanted to be a city and didn't want to stay a county. 1870, County of Alexandria. We have 3 districts, 3 county board members, 1 in each district, about 3,000 people, 35% black, 34 square miles. From the 70s to the 80s, several black citizens were elected to the county board. William Rowe was one of them, who was actually board chair. The 3 districts, if you want to know, were called Washington, Arlington, and Jefferson. And Washington, if you take a line from the Key Bridge up what was then Lee Highway to the north, that was Washington. If you go from the 14th Street Bridge, which was Long Bridge back then, and go up Columbia Pike, to the left of that, to the south is Jefferson, in the middle is Arlington. So you have 3 districts at that time. 1900, you still have 3 districts, 3 county board members, 6,000 people. We've doubled, 38% black, still 34 square miles, no black board members since the 1880s. Jim Crow has swept the nation in the 90s, right? And the 1902 Virginia Constitution is about to be approved. The clerk of the court there was Frank Lyon, by the way, in 1902 down in Richmond. And there was a poll tax, literacy test, understanding clauses. The voting plummeted 80% among the black and poor whites also. You know, they made a big thing that we're not going to affect the white people, but they got hit too. 1930, January 1st, we still 3 districts, 3 county board members, 26,000 people. So we're going up, right? 6,000 to 30 years to 26. It's now only 12% black. So everybody moving in is white at this point in time. 26 square miles because Alexandria has taken our property. 1940, 5 county board members. How do we get from 3 to 5? I'll go through that in a couple of slides. 57,000 people, 9% black, 26 square miles. I put East Falls Church there because, you know, Falls Church started as a town. And like a town, it was part of a county. Part of it was in Fairfax County, part in Arlington County. The people in Arlington County said, we don't want to be part of the town anymore. So they petitioned to just be in our county. And that's why you hear is East Falls Church neighborhood. So that's a little trivia for you there. So what did we have? We went from a rural county to white suburbia, right? The population, 57,000 in 1940. In 1944 is about 120,000. 1950 is 135,000. So the growth is astronomical. But let's go back to the early 20th century. There was great dissatisfaction with governance as a county. And in fact, in 1908, part of the county, which was it's now in the city of Alexandria, like Delray area, they created the town of Potomac because they wanted to have a mayor, you know, have their police, have their own police department. It was, by the way, blatantly on the Constitution for town of Potomac to be a whites only town. But again, there's dissatisfaction with governance. In 1911, the General Assembly allows us to have a subdivision ordinance. See, we have to, as a county, go back to the General Assembly for so many laws, one at a time. In the 20s, we had to go back for a zoning ordinance. This was happening time after time. 1912, there was proposed legislation to convert to a city charter. 1916, the Civ Fed forms, and the big call for public water and sewage. 1920, I just call it the Clarendon Rebellion. The Clarendon, which was very vibrant with 2 rail lines going through, they wanted to be their own town. They petitioned the Virginia Supreme Court eventually to be their own town, and the Supreme Court turned them down. Said, no, you're part of a homogeneous county. You have to stay in the county. But it was great. They were really upset about the lack of public water and sewage. It makes me think of J. Elwood Clement's screed about germ-infested outhouses. You know, that's what you had there. This was in the 20s. The county changed its name, by the way, right? It was actually Alexandria County, and then in 1920 we changed to Arlington. 1920, so that's how we got to 5 at large. There's a lot more history in there, but I have to get to 1946. There were 51 candidates in the election of 1931. 51 candidates for the 5 seats. That's when they needed ranked choice voting, did they not, right? 4-year terms for everybody. The Better Government League has a slate and wins 4 of the 5 seats. It was the Better Government slate was Chamber of Commerce, Bar Association, and Civic Federation. There were 3 black candidates for it, including Dr. Edward Morton, who has a great story. it should, I need to do a lecture on him at some point in time. But the better government's late wins. Now, I just bring this up as kind of the ping pong of political life. In 1930, the Civ Fed wanted 5 board members, 4-year terms, elected every 4 years. In 1938, they successfully lobbied to change it to staggered terms. And then in 1946, they tried to get rid of staggered terms, and they didn't win on that time, and we still have staggered terms. But what's with this dissatisfaction? Is it the structure, or is it what's going on politically? January 2nd, 1942, board chair is Ed Campbell at the organizing meeting of the county board, and he says, Arlington is probably destined to become the largest city in the state, despite anything we may wish to do about it. And so the machine prepares legislation to incorporate. And this is, earlier talked about city and county. It gets complicated because we're often called a city. We're jurisdictionally a county, and I think we're tied for second biggest jurisdiction, close with Chesapeake. Virginia Beach is the biggest jurisdiction in the state. Virginia Beach is over 400 square miles. City of Virginia Beach, we're 26. So we're the most dense jurisdiction, but we're called a county for the moment. February 1942, city charter comes out. Incorporation Enabling Act for the county, drafted. Fenwick, Senator Fenwick, you may know that name, and Delegate Medley are writing the bill. So this is February 1942. You'll see on the screen a little thing about sand provided to help quench bomb fires here. All right, putting in context, this is February 1942, 2 months after Pearl Harbor. And they were giving sand to every school so that if they were hit by bombs, they could put out the fires. So that was kind of on their mind. Nothing happened. The war is taking place. So the city charter kind of sits for 4 years. All right, here we are, 1946. Incoming board chair Campbell, the incoming board always makes a statement. He says, this is what we need: more adequate garbage disposal, improvement upon the bad conditions of roads and sidewalks, elimination of the terribly overcrowded conditions in the schools, and increased sewage disposal facilities and incinerator. Some of these issues keep revolving every so often, right? About the city, he says, something which sooner or later will have to be done. The question is, should we do it now? So that's the incoming 1946 board chair. But we have tensions going on. Tensions. The war veterans are come back and they want housing. The old timers, I used to call them old timers, I didn't know what to call them. They want no more density. So I put that headline there. There's nothing new under the sun. Homeowners sue on store zoning in 1946. All right, always an issue. Other tensions. There's a headline: housing facilities hopelessly short. Not enough facilities for the veterans coming back. And then you have the petition opposing the apartment zoning. Actually on 10th Street in Barton. You may know that area where there is an apartment building now. But there's always these tensions coming in the county. What are some other tensions? School parents want better schools. They want to issue school bonds. Civic Federation wants no bonds. The machines want to become a city. And what about the Black community? Throughout 1946, and all what I can find is it's a voice that's not heard. I say they want justice. 1940, they started the NAACP chapter. Esther Irving Cooper started it. 1946 actually started the fundraising for the Veterans Memorial YMCA to be in Green Valley. Meanwhile, YMCA was being built for the white community over on Kirkwood. And it was the beginnings of the equality lawsuit called Constance Carter versus School Board, filed in the 40s, when they were trying with Thurgood Marshall and others to trying to at least equalize facilities. And that's, again, that's for the 1948 year that I'll do in 2 years maybe. So the move to cityhood marks new year for Arlington. It seems like a done deal. They've been working on it, right? The Civic Federation hears the support of non-partisan elections for future city. Non-partisan elections. What is that issue coming up? So the General Assembly's in session. There's a second bill to revoke staggered terms, as I said, Fed wanted to revoke it. And there's a headline, poll tax on the way out. It's 1946, saying that we think we're going to get it. Abolition of the poll tax. Didn't happen to the 1960s. And interest. So mistake number one, the delegates pledge no charter changes, right? You don't tell the Arlington community that you can't make any changes to our proposed bills. So the residents here are cityhood debated by public figures. So you have the machine, Fenwick and Campbell advocating for it. You have this fellow, John Locke Green, who opposed it. He's a Republican who somehow got elected as treasurer in the late 30s. And he speaks out against it. We'll hear more from John Locke Green. But he makes an interesting case in one of the newspaper articles that we don't need to be a city until we reach population of 300,000. Now, where he picked that number out, I don't know. But, we're about 240 right now. But he picked that number out before there was even a thing called Metro. I mean, so not sure where he got that. So February 1946, the Sun editorial on a hearing is saying the opinion unanimously expressed on the part of many civic organizations and individuals, the charter should provide for non-partisan elections and provide for a referendum to decide whether the council should have 5 or 7 members. Okay, so this is 80 years ago. I would note nonpartisan elections is what our sister city, I'll call it City of Falls Church, is nonpartisan elections, right? And maybe we can learn from them as we go forward. So anyway, the civic committee of the CivFed and all these organizations, they have we're great on creating committees and coalitions in Arlington, right? The committee says we're curious to identify the supporters of the present charter and why they do not publicly state their position. To me, that means that this is the machine wants it this way, and they don't really have much support. Florence Cannon, she's in the CivFed. The next year, she'll become a county board member. She proposes elections in June, not November. That ends up getting in the legislation. Again, looking at City of Falls Church, those you know City of Falls Church history, they had elections in May, I think, until like 2011 or 2012 when they moved them to November. So a lot going on. So the fight on the charter will be carried before the assembly. The Citizens Committee, they're pressing for inclusion of voting, recall provisions. They want a lot more referendums to be able to be brought by the people. And they win the first round in the fight for liberal charter. The 4 amendments are agreed upon by George Dam and Maynard Magruder. They kind of concede the initial victory. But by March 1946, the charter measure is passed, but you don't hear much talk about it in the newspapers. I can't find it. I don't even see where in a petition, they even tried to have a petition. They had to have 1,000 signatures to get the legislation on for a referendum, and nothing happens. Now, here's where I have my, I know somewhere in my notes that the charter measure, to me, highlights the historical problem of relying on AI, okay? AI pops up when we need to do some of these Google searches, okay? Is that Governor Tuck, who was governor at the time, vetoes the city charter. There was no veto of the city charter. Where did AI come up with that? So again, just a warning to all of us to be very careful about what we read. Here's a poll tax warning. The League of Women Voters issued a voters primer covering all the factors affecting voting. Because the thing about the poll tax, not just you have to pay some money, you had to do it 6 months in advance. So in other words, you had to do it by May. If you haven't paid your poll tax, you're not voting in November. And you're not able to sign a referendum petition either. So they're trying to get the word out. And this was interesting, again, just what the culture was like. I put a definition of minority rule. Only 5,431 of Arlington's 20,000 registered voters went to the polls last November in 1945. In a community of more than 115,000 citizens, this is indeed minority rule. All right. And that's the thing about the machine way of politics, because I don't even bother to vote, right? And if you want to vote, we're not going to tell you have to pay your poll tax in advance. You need to leave League voters to at least help you on that. Now, what happened to the staggered election to get rid of staggered terms. McCarthy says the petition not properly filed to call the referendum. Turns out that you only needed actually 200 signatures to get this on a referendum, but the Civic Federation was confused about the deadline date. It was August 1st. So on August 1st, one of the women from Civic Fed, Beulah Goss, goes to the courthouse. Judge McCarthy's on vacation. She leaves the petition on a bench in the courthouse. Okay. McCarthy says, I never got it. Turned out it was found on a radiator somewhere. And it turns out that they only had 167 signatures, not 200. So staggered terms are not in the referendum. So all that hoo-ha in the General Assembly, city charter, staggered elections, terms are out the door. So what else is in the context of 1946? Here is one. Teacher talks back. The tempest at Barcroft School last week when the principal and her 5 teachers sent the children home and quit teaching for a day. There were some real problems in the school. I haven't been able to dig down on this rabbit hole, but there was a lot of problems. Resigning janitor stirs the school probe. Cherrydale Elementary School, anybody here went there, was in terrible condition apparently, and the janitor kind of blew the whistle. I liked it. It was resigning janitor, and the article says that this janitor had inherited a lot of money, and so he was resigning, and now he's blowing the whistle. So the superintendent Kemp, he's answering criticism of the schools. There is much unhappiness with the schools. Here's a headline from March 1st. Children not wanted. Children not wanted where? Apartments. Apartments were not renting to families with children. Crisis in trash. We had the dump at the end of Glebe Road by 4 Mile Run. They really needed an incinerator. It was a crisis. Jim Crow cases appealed. This is actually, again, you find these headlines. There was a black couple from Green Valley, which was who were asked to go to the back of the bus. The bus went from DC to Arlington. They were in the 4th row. The bus driver cuts up and says, you have to move to the back. And it was just one white person in row behind them. There were 3 empty seats in the front, and they arrested the black couple. So I just, there's so much going on in Arlington at this time. That's a rabbit hole I haven't fully discovered yet. I got to investigate that more. So now there are 3 minor newspapers articles in May. Number 1, Dan Dugan in race for county board. He's a complete newcomer. He's actually 29 years old at this time. He's a veteran, a war veteran. You say he was past commander of the John Lyon Post, announced his candidacy to run as independent because he is a federal employee. And he has a 10-point program which goes over the school issues, the incinerator, school bonds. He's obviously very well organized. And he says, this is from one of his campaign speeches. He is really upset about schools. The entire system used in the selection of school board members is outdated as button shoes. Now, many of us may not remember button shoes. When members of the electoral board can be perpetuated in office for 2 decades, it's time for a change. 23 years ago, I entered the Boston Elementary School, and at the same time, one of the present incumbents of the electoral board took office. I was compelled by reasons of crowded conditions and outmoded educational methods to attend school for only 3 hours a day. 1st grade, 2nd grade were half days. More than 20 years have passed and we still plod along in the same old rut. 1946, 1st grade, 2nd grade, still half days. The next article in May, a new group forms to promote schools. Countywide committee set up meeting of 50. This fellow, Oscar LeBeau, Dr. Oscar LeBeau, is fed up with schools. He puts an ad in the newspaper. I'm fed up with the schools. I'm having a meeting at Buckingham Community Center. Who wants to join me? And more than 50 people show up, and it starts the Citizens Committee for School Improvements, which becomes a remarkable organization in Arlington. Dr. LeBeau is a doctor or a PhD. He works at the Department of Agriculture because at this time, more than 70% of our population worked for the federal government, which is why it was important for Dan Dugan to run as an independent. And they were just the most well-organized committee I've ever seen. And then article number 3, school board position to be filled, that the trustees are going to meet on May 27th to appoint a member of the school board for a 4-year term. The term of B.M. Smith will expire. You may know that name, B.M. Smith, in real estate. So no candidates yet have surfaced. Then you see an article, school trustees meet Monday, 5 nominees for the post. And the nominees include Harry Porter, who's with a law firm of Porter Radigan, Adams and Porter, Leon Brown, Joseph Elwood Clements. We see J. Elwood Clements there. Hooray for him. He ends up becoming sheriff, actually, in 1948 for a number of years. The Reverend Paul R. Hunter and Mrs. Elmer Carson. Mrs. Carson had been a principal in New Jersey. They say for the first time in their history, the electoral board trustees are having interviews, right? Because nobody bothered to push the electoral board on this. Who wants a voice? CCSI. So Reverend Paul Hunter was the church's first full-time pastor. And I just want to tell you how well organized they were, all right? He was endorsed by the Citizens Committee for School Improvements, the New Arlington Citizens Association. That was a new Citizens Association, New Arlington, I think in response to the Civ Fed. The Federation of Cooperative Preschools, Columbia Pike Citizens Association, James Madison PTA, Cherrydale Women's Club, Women's League of the Arlington Jewish Center. They have a lot of people pushing Paul Hunter to be a school board member. I like this one. The Patrick Henry PTA wished to sponsor Reverend Hunter, but they were told at the meeting the action was contrary to the rules of the National PTA. The members immediately constituted themselves as the Patrick Henry Citizens Association and on motion endorsed him. So this was important stuff to the folks then. Now, Reverend Paul Hunter, his son was James Hunter. All right, many of you know James Hunter, former county board member. So again, they were members of Rock Spring Congregational Church. May 27th meeting. This is the one which was a near riot. All right, they protest. So Porter got named to the school board at the May 27th meeting. Right, he was the machine's choice. Again, he was a partner at a successful Arlington law firm, and the members of the CCSI stayed in their seats and would not leave. And they would not leave. And they demanded to know, they wanted to know how the board eliminated Reverend Hunter, who had been heartily endorsed by the majority of civic organizations. And the head of the trustees said, well, we have received petitions that created a tally favorable to Porter. And they were having none of that. So they said, we want to see those petitions. And Kirkpatrick, the trustee, said, well, I can't give it to you. And they said, I'll let Dr. LeBeau look at the petition. So Dr. LeBeau is given a chance to look at it, not given a chance to even talk about it. They leave, everybody leaves, but they were extremely unhappy with the school system. So Judge McCarthy, he is the decider, this Judge McCarthy, for naming the trustees. And he's feeling some heat because what happens within a month is that the trustee positions expire June 30th, and he has to name new trustees. Oh, man. So what does the group suggest? 8 people for the trustee positions. Here are our 8. They put up the name Elizabeth Campbell, who was the wife of Edmund Campbell, Dr. Harold Stone. I may know him. His wife, Catherine Stone, became General Assembly, first woman from Northern Virginia to serve in General Assembly in the 50s. There were a lot of great husband-wife teams in the 40s and 50s, Malcolm Miller and Martha Miller. So all of these names are put on there. And then McCarthy has to clarify the appointment policy because the CCSI was saying the people who are appointed should know something about education. And he goes, oh, yes, well, maybe not too much about education. So he clarifies his appointment policy. And so there are 3 trustees to be named. 2 are machine people, and he does name Dr. Harold Stone. But CCSI is very upset with the school trustee naming criticism. And who joins in the criticism but Dan Dugan, right? Because he's a candidate now, and he's trying to beat Edmund Campbell. Edmund Campbell, again, was a 2-term incumbent board chair, highly respected. So he finds his constituency, right? His constituency are veterans, war veterans. He goes to see all the North County war veterans, and he goes, better school is his aim, Dugan says. He goes to the CCSI and talks with them. So he's finding his constituency. So CCSI goes to work. Now, this is, there's a box of files in the library archives, because they had 19 standing committees. And one committee and one officer position was historian. Yeah. And I just say that, I would get on my soapbox. It's like all of our organizations, we should think about, if not officially, having a historian who writes down what we're doing, so to speak. So anyway, they were really good. They have to get 1,000 signatures, right? And they're pushing for kindergarten, full day first and second grades, reduce pupils per teacher to an average of 30. It was like high 30s, and more facilities, including a new junior high school and a conveniently located Negro secondary school. So, I mean, there is some consideration to the Black population, but again, for those new to Virginia, we were segregated in our schools, Black and white at that time. So they get 5,225 signatures. They needed 1,000. They did it in 2 weeks, in August. How did they do it? So I want to, they were organized, unbelievably organized, including what we call phone trees. Some of you remember that, where you were given a list of 20 names and phone numbers and you asked to call them. But here were their canvassers. Mrs. John Woodworth had a district chairman, Mrs. Martha Miller, who took the Claude Swanson area. They listed the 6 schools there. I don't want to name all the schools, but her area was Stonewall Jackson, Woodrow Wilson, Robert E. Lee. You get a feel for what's going on in Arlington at that time, right? Thomas Nelson Page, ooh, man. Mrs. Barber, E.S. Barber, she had the Thomas Jefferson area. And by the way, their addresses are in there and their phone numbers. Like hers was Glebe 5761. Again, back in the day, we didn't have 10 numbers for phone numbers. We only had 5 or 6. Mrs. Sheldon Dean, Mrs. Evans, and Mrs. Esther Cooper, Esther Irving Cooper, who was head of the NAACP in Arlington at that time. She was in charge of the colored school districts, Hoffman, Boston, Kemper, and John Langston. The goal was to get 1,000 signatures. They got 5,225. And this letter to the editor, Dr. LeBeau, makes the point that we could have gotten even more. So what we want is school bonds to be voted on this election, right? And when you think about it, in the 45 election, there were only 5,000 people who voted, right? If they got 5,225 signatures, so they got new voters, right, out of that. But the school bond, postponed school bond action. So people are not happy, okay? But you got these war veterans and school parents who are just not happy. Now, Dugan is aggressively, he's got this great campaign manager, Harley Williams, and he's called a Republican candidate in sheep's clothing. Okay. In another article, he's called a communist. All right. So yeah, pretty good that he could be called a Republican and a communist. Though I will say the Republican thing I could somewhat understand, because the GOP does endorse him. So GOP knows that their candidate's not going to win. So they say, we'll endorse Dan Dugan. And but he was not taking Republican positions. Another federal employee had announced and was running ever since February, H.H. Howe. He withdraws from the race to support Dugan. So everybody is funneling their votes to Daniel Dugan. And the machine keeps getting wrapped. Frank Ball, and this is actually Frank Ball Jr., right? Frank Ball Sr., he was a state senator. Frank Ball Jr. was an attorney. He was offered a proxy to the Democratic convention, but declined. He had won the most votes in the Boston precinct to be able to go to the convention, but the machine did not give him a vote. But somebody else decided, I'll give him my proxy. But he said, no, I don't want it. And he wraps the machine. He doesn't want to take part in it. John Locke Green, at a Republican gathering, criticizes Byrd, who owns, operates, and controls the Virginia press. what's really also interesting as I read newspaper archives, what newspaper am I reading, right? Richmond Times-Dispatch, Richmond News Leader, ooh, really bad. Byrd owned the Winchester Star and a bunch of other newspapers. Crandall Mackey owned the Arlington Chronicle. And if you read my column on our man in Arlington in 1941, he was a rabid racist against the Japanese race. I mean, you have to be careful what you're reading. I will say, the Arlington Daily is pretty good, but the Sun's guy, Howard Bloomer, as the publisher, was really good. There are dueling letters to the editor. I'm just checking my time because I'm doing pretty good, I think. I'm moving along. So Fenwick and Medley and the Sun is printing these long letters. And they're, Fenwick and Medley are for Campbell and Harley Williams and others. The CCSI is taking a nonpartisan. We're not endorsing anybody, by the way, but kind of who's on their side. And this is a photo which didn't come, it's not in the newspaper. It's very hazy in the newspaper itself. But this was taken at the Washington Golf and Country Club of the Smith-Byrd Club. Howard Smith was our congressman at that time. You talk about extremely racist. Check the 1960 civil rights struggles where he wouldn't let bills get through until JFK did the end around. Smith and Byrd are running for re-election. At this luncheon is all the Byrd Machine people. Byrd didn't show up himself. Smith was there and others, and Ed Campbell's there smiling too. So he is caught as a machine man, even though in some of these letters to the editor, let's see if I can find it. Oh, okay. So Harley Williams writes this long letter saying all the bad things about the machine. Then he says, I do not charge all members of the machine in Arlington are venal. Not all members, right? Okay, well, which ones are, right? Some individuals are aligned with the machine to perpetuate themselves in office. Others for promoting their political ambitions. Some machine members apparently became entangled for less selfish reasons than others. And Mr. Edmund Campbell is apparently in this group. But then he goes on to say, we're not overlooking that. He is part of the machine. So it was interesting. Not everybody was venal, part of the machine. So the final days of the campaign, this is Dugan's assessment, actually on the stump. The truth is that whether Mr. Campbell is sincere or not in his lip service to the cause of progress, he is under control of a machine that does not believe in progress. He is, in fact, the principal window dressing of this machine. They allow him to sound off a few progressive notes and occasionally make a few concessions in his direction if public pressure is great enough. But he is as much in their toils as a man who's been caught by an octopus. Now, that is a great metaphor. Now, I tried to find a picture of a man caught by an octopus. I just couldn't find it. But I think that sums it up right there. I mean, he's very clear about it. So the election happens. The New Deal dies. I didn't know it died in 1946. Anyway, New Deal dies because GOP holds Congress. But Dugan wins. Campbell loses the race in county upheaval. They misspell upheaval, but that's okay. And Dugan reiterates platform. So he won with 5,790 to 4742. All right, pretty comfortable margin. More than double the votes in 45. Howard Smith wins in Arlington barely, but he wins easily in overall, and Harry Byrd also wins. Again, close in Arlington, but over the whole state, Byrd wins easily. So Dugan wins. It's upset. An incumbent. I'm not sure. Some other historian, I'm looking around, what other incumbents have lost, Democratic incumbents? I don't know. All right, so the Sun editorial, and I'll tell you, this guy from the Sun, Howard Bloomer, is great. He says, a new page was turned in local politics Tuesday. The voters chose to put a new cycle of events in motion. And it's a long editorial. These are great editorials. All right, so here's what Howard Bloomer says. It was a protest vote against the county board as a whole and the county administration. Mr. Dugan afforded an opportunity to rally this protest and by an aggressive campaign and a determined act against what he repeatedly referred to as the machine. He built his strength up so well, it wasn't until the voting was hours underway that the trend became evident to those who thought they had their fingers on the political pulse of the county. And then he goes on to say, without intending to minimize his ability, the people were voting against the ends when they voted for him. They were voting against the ends because, one, storm drainage damages many homes and properties. Garbage and trash collections are often delayed. Arlington schools have no kindergarten. Streets are rough and broken. Open ditches in residential areas breed vermin. Registration to vote has been difficult. And buck passing is a fine art at the courthouse. There was just citizen dissatisfaction. And he ends it with saying, looking to the future, I think. Arlington voters did more than merely choose a new board member. They chose to put a new cycle of events in motion. Whether this cycle gains speed or dies away is something only the passage of time can determine. But as of the present moment, we think it has a long course to run. So it's seen as a party protest, a long course to run. So I want to look to kind of briefly end with the legacy of 1946 Arlington. The citizens successfully lobbied for the first elected school board in Virginia. They got a referendum in early 47, and they elected school board members in November of 1947, Elizabeth Campbell, among others. CCSI was effective through the 1960s. It took more than 10 years to get kindergarten in all the schools. When I was looking through the box, CCSI, I'm looking like 1959. People were opposing. They're saying it's just childcare. It takes a long time sometimes to affect change. The Byrd Machine, politicians become Republicans. I don't know if I'm making up this Dino's Democrats in name only. Somebody else has probably thought of that. But in 1946, every presidential election in the 20th century through 1946, the voters of Virginia voted for the Democrat candidate. Okay, the one time they did not, from 1900 to 1946, was 1928 when Al Smith, the Catholic, ran for president. 1920s was a big Ku Klux Klan era in Virginia throughout. But then after 46, Harry Byrd is not endorsing Adlai Stevenson, and the votes start changing for Republican presidents. So these are some of the changes. So the citizens slate sweeps the election of the school board. The citizens committee have 5 members they're pushing, all 5 won. And Florence Cannon also ran as a nonpartisan named to the county board. Voting sets new record in 1947, 12,289 voters. But there is a push and pull of politics, right? In 1948, the old school board members sued the new school board members, saying that they were not legitimately elected. And it took 6 or 7 months, and the lawsuit was not successful. Was that push and pull. And of course, then during massive resistance, suddenly the General Assembly took away our right to have elected school boards. So push and pull of politics. 1952, we have a nonpartisan majority on the county board. All right. So Dugan was elected in 46. Then Robert Cox was elected as a federal employee, and Alan Dean, also nonpartisan. So we have 3-2. You'll see him there. Robert Peck was county board member. He later became a school board member, and Alfred Frisbee. But in fact, in one of my researches, I was looking at minutes of a county board meeting, and there was to be a vote to create a housing authority in Arlington, 1952. But unfortunately, Robert Cox was ill for a number of months, so he couldn't attend the county board meeting. It was 2-2 vote. We never had a housing authority, so that's a little bit of trivia there. Anyway, it's a 3-2 majority on the county board, but the 3 county board members lose their jobs. Well, how do you lose your job? Good old John Locke Green brought a lawsuit in 1952 to throw off the 3 federal employees, not based on the Hatch Act. And it actually was not based on much. And Ed Campbell represented the county board members who were being turned out. And he thought he had won the lawsuit. And Judge McCarthy goes to him and says, hey, I found this old lawsuit dating back to a statute in Virginia in the 1790s. And McCarthy ruled that the 3 county board members were thrown out. And so John Locke Green also sued the school board members in the mid-50s too. He was one of our original gadflies, so to speak. So they're push and pull. So the 3 county board members lose their seats. What do? They create Arlingtonians for a better county, right? A meeting of 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, 5 nonpartisans, including Ed Campbell and Dan Dugan. All right. So what goes around comes around. Campbell, in one of his interviews, says, if you can't beat them, join them. So the Arlingtonians for a Better County was a nonpartisan group. Ellen Bosman, her 6 terms for county board, 5 of them, I think she just ran their ABC, not as a Democrat. So we had a long run of nonpartisan activity, which I think is one of the legacies of Dan Dugan's run. Campbell Head Study of Arlington as City. Where was this headline from? This is 1958. 1958, we're thinking about being a city again. They named Ed Campbell as the head of it. Where did it go? Didn't go anywhere. I had time for another lecture on all the times we've tried to change our governance structure. But that is a year to remember. Here's a picture of the Glebe Movie Theater on Glebe Road near what was then Lee Highway. God is My Co-Pilot, starring Dennis Morgan, was a big hit of Christmas 1945. And Arlington, again, a heck of a year, 1946. Thank you. I think I got it. Yeah. So happy to take questions. I have to always remember to repeat questions if anybody has any questions. And then maybe some on the Zoom, and Marty will let me know that. Any questions, Sean?
Great talk. Very confusing. I mean, that's the whole thing. Yeah. Would you consider Edmund Campbell a machine politician who found religion, or because I never thought of Campbell as really sort of a machine person, and it's like the co-founder of WEPA, so it seems kind of like a metamorphosis.
I think that he was not a politician. All right. He was asked in the 30s to run for the county board. I think, in fact, he says in his interview, and again, these interviews are great material, that he didn't want to run, but Charlie Fenwick convinced him to run for the 3rd term. And I don't think he wanted to run. Though I will say he then was convinced to run for the open congressional seat in 1952 when he had an extra, and he ran against Joe Broyhill and lost by like 300 votes. So he did run again, but I think it's clear even from the way he conducted his campaign. And you read his interviews, he is the nicest guy. He cannot say a bad word about anybody. So I think, to your point, he was not a politician, because he was a lawyer, and he was the one who represented the city of Norfolk in one of the desegregation cases. The story on that is that Norfolk couldn't get anybody in Norfolk to represent the parents. And so they had to come up to Arlington and ask Ed Campbell to do that. And Ed did a lot of all his work on desegregation pro bono, but he said, I did charge Norfolk for the Norfolk parents. Yes?
What he said, it's confusing in a really great way. And it's interesting that not everyone is clearly on one side or another. And I was wondering in particular about Frank Ball. Was he generally a machine guy that just giving him the proxy just wasn't fair?
So the question is about Frank Ball. Was he a machine man? And this is Frank Ball Jr., but both Frank Ball Sr. and Jr. were not machine politicians. They were, and I think, Frank Ball Sr. was a state senator when Harry Byrd was state senator back in the late aughts, 20s. And I wonder how they didn't get along. I mean, Frank Ball was very traditional. So don't get me wrong. And in fact, my little bit of trivia on bad history is sometimes history of omission. There's a magazine article where he talks about the schools in Arlington prior to 1900. He just names a white school. The name there were, Kemper, he just sins of omission. So he was very conservative, but I think both he and his son did not like the machine. Anything? And Marty, anything?
Yeah, Bill, there is one, and it's actually, you could probably amplify on it a little bit. The simple question is, where can you access county board minutes? You've given a little introduction into the Charlie Clark Center, but you may want to expand on that.
How can you find county board minutes? I do not know. I just sometimes find them on the internet. I found one from 1950 because, so I can tell you a quick story. Jerry Emmerich was my mentor at my law firm. He was the first county attorney in the 70s. Again, we didn't have our own county attorney until the 70s because the state wouldn't let us have a county attorney. That's why they wanted to be a city, so they could have a city attorney. But anyway, Jerry was telling me about life in the courthouse in the 50s and 60s when bathrooms were segregated. I was like, really? And I never could find out the real story. And I just came across a 1950 minutes with Dan Dugan, who was a county board member, and he makes a motion to integrate the bathrooms in the county courthouse. And he doesn't get a second. I mean, but how do you find county board minutes? Let's go to the Charlie Clark Center and ask the people there.
Yeah, it's been a while since I reviewed some of that stuff when I was writing Walks with Charlie, but about 10 years ago. And I think there is a fair collection in there. I just can't remember how it's organized.
Well, Marty Sudan, whose voice we're hearing, is the researcher of researchers.
Oh, no.
And Sean Dennis, and Sean, raise your hand if you want to know how to do interviews. I know you're trying to do interviews, right? Yeah. Of people. So that's important. So, all right. So let me just close. Question, yeah.
Yeah, my understanding is that on our ballots, there's nonpartisan for school board, nonpartisan, but also on the county board that doesn't have the party listed next to the candidates. What's up? How did the county board become at least partisan? We had primaries. The school board is still today supposed to be nonpartisan.
Well, that's because of the legislation in the 90s that created, again, the right to have school board. So that controls that process, though it is complicated. Another bit of trivia, back in the old days on a ballot, to list it alphabetically, but the incumbent was always listed at the top, no matter what their alphabet was. I mean, that was interesting. And this whole concept of, appointing, there's so much in the governance structure. So one last thing I want to give a shout out to the electoral board. The electoral board, we have 3-member electoral board. The staff is amazing. The work they do is so hard. And we have here, I just want to give Richard Samp a shout out. He just rolls off the electoral board. Richard, thank you for your service. There's a lot that goes into making a community. So any last questions? You can just come up to me and we'll see you around. John Milliken is here. John, raise your hand. He's giving the talk on Sunday on the elections. Can you tell us what years you're choosing?
Well, we're going to trace the changes. It's really a statewide look. What's happened in Virginia in the last 20 years,
All right.
in terms of population and politics.
All right. So John was just saying he's just looking at the way things have changed over the years, which is always a good look. All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
Great. I'll end the Zoom meeting.